Mine is the first generation able to contemplate the possibility that we may live our entire lives without going to war or sending our children to war. That is a prize beyond value.
His decision to invade Iraq with the Americans that provoked the deepest controversy. Here's our World Affairs editor, John Simpson.
This is Baghdad, the grandiose monument that Saddam Hussein erected to himself and his greatness. Did Tony Blair really believe in the rightness of the cause of overthrowing Saddam, or did he merely think that it was in Britain's political interest to keep as close to the United States as possible, regardless of whether it was right or wrong? Well, Tony Blair is a conviction politician. That's his stock in trade. He needs to believe in the rightness of what he says.
The entire direction of Tony Blair's premiership was changed by the events of the 11th of September 2001. They gave him a new and completely different cause to follow.
The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
Tony Blair had helped the previous American administration reorder the world, and it had worked well, both for Britain and for Blair. But George W. Bush was a very different American president. What, someone asked, did they have in common? Books, ideals, religious experience?
Well, we both use Colgate toothpaste.
They're going to wonder how you know that, George.
But President Bush was planning to demonstrate America's undiminished power by taking out Saddam Hussein, an apparently difficult but actually very easy target. Tony Blair went along with it, hoping to win wider backing. But that meant playing up the intelligence information.
It concludes that Iraq has chemical and biological weapons, that Saddam has continued to produce them, that he has existing and active military plans for the use of chemical and biological weapons, which could be activated within 45 minutes, including against his own Shia population.
Not a single part of this turned out to be true. Large numbers of people doubted it at the time, and 1 million people marched in London.
Neither the international community nor the British public is persuaded that there is an urgent and compelling reason for this military action in Iraq.
Still, Tony Blair went through with it. Saddam's overthrow was predictably quick and easy. Tony Blair felt sure some WMDs would be found. They weren't, and his reputation has been tarnished permanently. Not though among his American friends.
Prime Minister Blair has had an enormous impact on world politics, and he certainly has had an enormous impact on the special relationship between the United States and Great Britain. He has been a friend, he has been steadfast in the face of negative public opinion, in the face of crises. He stood steady, and we could always count on him. Some people say, well, you shouldn't always be able to count on him. But he came to his own conclusions, he made his own judgments.
The problem was that the enterprise in Iraq, ill thought out and badly planned, went so wrong. The insurgency grew stronger and stronger. Democratic elections, the centerpiece of the American and British plan, were a success, yet their real result was to accentuate the divisions in a badly divided society. Hundreds of thousands have died, not just blown up or shot, but often tortured to death in sectarian violence in unimaginably dreadful ways. Perhaps Tony Blair's basic problem, though, was that he remained so close to a man as deeply unpopular in Britain as George W. Bush was.
Prime Minister Blair is a visionary leader. I've come to know him as a man of unshakable convictions.
If he'd kept his distance more, his own people might have judged him less harshly.
When people look back on this time and look back on this conflict, I honestly believe they will see this as one of the defining moments of our century.
Maybe, but probably not in the way Tony Blair would like. John Simpson, BBC News, Baghdad.
Correspondent James Mates now on the legacy of Iraq.
Shock and awe, one of the defining images of the Blair decade. Historians may come to regard it as the defining image, because it was in this one moment, the attack on Iraq, that people's faith and, more importantly, trust in Tony Blair began to crumble.
Since the Iraq War, bluntly, millions of Britons have no longer believed Tony Blair to tell the truth, not only about Iraq, but on anything else.
It was clearly not necessary, and it wasn't just. And I think if you involve our armies in warfare, it must be just.
Iraq did for Tony Blair. He was finished after that cataclysmic era, and everything after that was just treading water.
There is nothing else that explains how a 3-times election winner fell so fast in public esteem. On almost every other issue, he's remained effortlessly in touch with public opinion. In his 10 years, there's been no major economic crisis, no Black Wednesday, no poll tax, neither personal scandal nor overwhelming atmosphere of sleaze. And on the event that was to define the early years of the 21st century, the attacks of 9/11, Tony Blair both reflected and articulated Britain's public mood.
This is not a battle between the United States of America and terrorism, but between the free and democratic world and terrorism.
If Tony Blair had been run over by a bus a week after 9/11, history would have said here was a man who understood Britain's relationship with America and was popular for it. Blair was immensely popular on both sides of the Atlantic in the way he responded to 9/11. But since then, certainly as far as the British public is concerned, he's got it badly wrong. He's seen as a poodle to a particularly right-wing American president that the British public despise.
From the moment 9/11 happened, Tony Blair agreed with George Bush that the rules had changed. He sent British troops to fight alongside the Americans in driving the Taliban and Al-Qaeda out of Afghanistan. But then he went much further. He bought into the neoconservative Bush doctrine that the only way to fight the threat of terror was preemptive war, with Saddam Hussein the first target.
He believed that the job of a British Prime Minister was never, repeat, never publicly ever to say anything remotely critical of an American president, but to try to work behind the scenes to do a little bit of good. Quite frankly, George Bush took him for a ride.
I think he faced a growing unpopularity and an anger within the British people that they were definitely duped over the reasons for going in. I do think the British people felt let down, and you can't fool the British people. They love their armed forces, and if they see them deployed somewhere which they don't feel is necessary, then they will inevitably turn against the government.
And the war in Iraq refused to end. British troops continued to fight and to die for a cause the public back home found increasingly unconvincing. And as they did so, the government's case for war began to collapse amidst dodgy dossiers, sexed-up intelligence, and the suicide of Dr. David Kelly, one of Britain's top specialists on Iraq's weapons. And with every month, every week the war went on, the damage this did to Tony Blair continued to grow.
If things don't turn around for the better in Iraq, then the legacy will be failure in the Middle East and failure in Asia, and all the other good things that he has done in the Balkans and in Africa and on fighting world hunger. All that will be eclipsed by failure.
I would say what legacy? From my point of view, the legacy that I have is a son whose life was cruelly taken by a roadside bomb in Basra in 2005. And that is the legacy he's left me.
But I ask you to accept one thing. Hand on heart, I did what I thought was right. I may have been wrong. I may have been wrong. I may have been wrong.
So was he really trying to say sorry for this, Iraq? Certainly it was a more humble Tony Blair than we had seen before.